Hi everyone, welcome to this new video series that I've started where I'll be talking with people who are following not so mainstream career paths and journeys and what we can learn from them. And I will be talking with them, getting some inspiration for you out there and see how they do things differently, which makes their journey not so mainstream. So today will be the first series of the video and you can see I'm on Zoom. So I'm actually waiting for my guest to join me. And without further ado, let's get started. Hi everyone, so in the first video of this series, Not So Mainstream, I have with me Crystal, who is a marketer and storyteller for more than a decade now. And I think that's also an amount of time that we know each other that we'll talk about later in the video. But I'm so excited to have you here, Crystal. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be reconnecting with you after so many years as well. We briefly met, like you said, around a decade ago. And I think we've always been following each other's work from afar. I've always been, admiring your enthusiasm for life, and always inspired by the stories you share.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. So without further ado, I'm gonna start with our conversation. So to start with, let's look into your work philosophy, what you do, how you do it, and what motivates you when it comes to your work and the things that you do.
Yeah, I think when it comes to my work philosophy, I've always considered myself quite the ambitious, driven type, but it wasn't what most people understand of ambition and career being career driven. Most people think of that in terms of achieving a certain milestone, like becoming financially independent by 40 or getting this promotion by 35, and all these like very tangible, obvious career milestones. For me, being ambitious just means being the best I can be, wherever I can be. When I was really young, I don't know who told me this phrase, but I remembered it and internalized it, to bloom where you're planted. Because I think when you're younger, it's all about absorbing and learning. Earlier in your career, you often have to do things like make the coffee or arrange the chairs, and that's what gets you into the doors, to be seen by more senior people. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to have been surrounded by good bosses and good mentors in my career. And I was also very passionate and detail oriented in whatever I found to do. So I got a series of promotions quite early on, already starting in my 20s, and opportunities to manage teams of 6 to 8 people. In my late 20s, early 30s already. And so people will always ask me, Crystal, how do you get all this done? How do you set these goals for yourself? But that was never the end goal. Those were really just the byproducts of the main goal, which was to fully realize my potential. And I think I also credit my parents for how they raised me. They would always say that they would help us understand strengths, weaknesses. They would talk about being a all-rounded, well-rounded person. They would tell us about how, me and my siblings, our personalities are different. And so they always told me, you're good at writing, use that. And they encouraged me to pursue that to the fullest. And somehow in the different industries I've been in the different roles I've had, whether it's been in communications or marketing, which requires very diverse skill sets, the main core strength I've always been able to apply was that skill of writing. And that was something my parents encouraged at a very young age. Since I was 9 or 10, writing, essays in school, they were able to see that being one of my gifts. And that was also a concept they taught me about gifts, playing to our gifts and playing to our strengths. And they encouraged me to use that rather than focusing on, oh, you're not good at math, why don't you work harder at it, like a lot of Asian parents would, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, so good to know. And I really like where you pointed out about about being ambitious and you're following the certain milestones, which kind of like the world gives us as is. But I think success and being ambitious, like if you have your own definition, that makes it more easier and more like, fulfilling and personal. So I really love the way you described it. All right, so moving on, I want to know, because again, like I've been following your work for so long, and I know and really like how you connect your personal journey and personal experience with your professional life and achievements. But you also give like a step-by-step way to achieve certain things. Like it's not just sharing your story, but also giving people this like framework of how you can apply lessons for your personal life towards your professional life or career. But it comes with a certain amount of like vulnerability, I guess. I also do that in some way, so I partly like understand that it is challenging. I want to know your take on it. Like, how do you deal with it, or how do you, manage when you are putting yourself out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, writing has always been a thing for me, and it's how I process the world. Even before I started getting paid to write, things like annual reports, company pitch decks, speeches. I ghostwrite a lot of things as well. But before I was doing any of that, I was always blogging back in the days of having a Zanga, when we were still using MySpace. And even before that, I was writing a journal in like Word documents saved in a local file. So I was always writing to process the world around me, to process experiences, to process my feelings. And I think my dad as well is a writer. He used to edit a magazine, and so he was the first editor I ever had. He would correct my writing and leave a lot of like very detailed notes in red pen, and he would cross out this and that and correct my grammar, teach me how to write in a more simple way. And I think that has always been such a part of me that, when I started weaving that into my job and my career and getting paid for that and getting a lot of positive feedback about how well you write, I think for me, it was still important to retain that old part of myself where I started writing purely for the joy of it. I think sometimes when I start writing too much marketing copy and I feel like all I'm doing is just selling a product or service, and it can lose its meaning, and I feel like I'm getting uninspired, and my tool or my knife of writing is getting dull. And to make it sharp again, I really sometimes feel like I just need to do some writing creatively just for the sake of it. So that's why, my Instagram captions become long, or I write stuff for my personal Medium account on random things like, how I equate life to a video game, or how losing, or feeling like I was going to lose my pet cat when I was falling sick was also very similar to grieving the end of a romantic relationship. And just anything that makes me feel or makes me think or inspires me, like I feel like I always need to be writing about it so that I don't lose that connection with the skill, and that I'm doing it about a topic that I care about, is meaningful to me. Because sometimes at work you don't get to choose that. You just have to write about whether it's coffee or whether it's a shipping company. You just have to write that, and you have to write that by a certain timeline. So I think for me, number one, it was important to keep that inspiration mainly for myself. That was the first reason. But the second reason I kept like opening up about my life and putting my writing out there online and sharing it with people was because I think when I first started doing it for myself, I started to receive, since I started doing this since my teenage years, I started to receive feedback from people who would private message me or reach out to me or tell me personally that, hey, I really needed to read that thing that you wrote. I resonated so much with it. I write a lot about relationships as well. Difficult topics like grieving or self-awareness, becoming aware of your past trauma. So those are things that people don't often speak about in polite conversation, but it's something you can write about when you're going deep because you're writing about it alone. But then when you put it out there, it allows someone else to share that space of reflection with you. And so I had people reaching out to me saying, thank you, this meant a lot. You put how I was feeling into words. I couldn't find the words to express how I was feeling, but I think you described it really well. And so that was my second motivation for continuing to do that. Although there was definitely a balance, especially when, the more I was advancing at work and getting promoted and being a visible leader, I also realized I had to be careful not to overshare too much details of my private life. So there's a difference, I think, between oversharing to vent on social media versus taking something that might not be the most pleasant experience to talk about, might not be something you're proud of sharing, and you might not share it at a dinner party. But I think there's a difference between taking that kind of experience and reflecting deeply on it and processing it, and then sharing it in a way where you're sharing the lessons you've learned, not to just vent or rage about it. So I realized that, sometimes doing this helps somebody else. And if it, even just one person told me that it meant something and it helped them through something, then I think it would have been worth it to just touch somebody else's life in that way.
That's true. That's amazing. And again, it's inspiring for, as you said, for yourself. Like it's, it's sort of your key recipe to help yourself motivated to what you do. So, I mean, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about a moment in your work that had made you the happiest, or anything that makes you the happiest when you do your work, like that one certain moment, if we talk about that.
Ooh, that one certain moment. I think it's, well, as a marketer and as a writer, I think the core of what I do, whether it's whatever that looks like, whether it's writing a company document for internal purposes or whether it's creating a video to be put on a website, I think the ultimate end goal of all creators is to get that wow effect. Whether you're presenting a really serious formal business proposal or a very fun, happy video, you want to work on the draft until over and over again, until by the time you present the final draft or iteration to the audience or the stakeholder, they look at it and go, wow, this is exactly what we wanted. You brought our vision to life. And I think it's that wow moment that cannot be manufactured, because someone can say politely, yeah, that's really good. But when someone says, wow, their eyes light up in a way that's really genuine. And I think I don't always achieve that, but that's the few times that I do achieve that feels really satisfying.
Yeah, and I also think that's very instant too, as you said, when it's real, it's instant, that wow factor that comes out. All right, so this one is my favorite question, because that kind of talks about how we got to know each other. So your big year, just a little background on that. It's a global contest where people from around the world, young people around the world, come together to work on different sustainable development goals. They make ideas into reality, make projects, work together, teamwork, leadership, all those sort of things, in order to do advocacy and promotions of topics like social topics that are important. So you were part of that, and I was also a part of your big year contest, I think 10, 11 years ago. And that's how we got to know each other. And I have observed, ever since that time, your work, and I kind of relate to you in that sense, because both of our work have been really global, as in connecting with people from around the world, which is not the case for everyone. Very few people get a chance to work on that large scale with different people, getting to know different cultures, diversity, and all those sort of things. So how that experience has shaped you as a person or in your career, how do you take that experience in your life?
That's a good question. I think I've always felt like a third culture kid. So for those who don't know that term, it really means that you just feel like you're not part of, you are from somewhere else, So that's your first culture, and then you now live somewhere else, so that's your second culture. But because you don't really feel fully a native in either culture, you're almost like this third culture kid that is kind of a blend of
Mhm. Right.
different cultures. And I've always felt like that, even though I'm Malaysian, I'm born in Malaysia, I grew up for the first part of my life until I went to university in the UK. I've always been in Malaysia, but I've always felt like a third culture kid simply because I didn't go to a normal school in Malaysia. My parents decided to homeschool me, and I guess it was also part of their unconventional way of raising their kids to play to their kids' strengths instead of being the atypical Asian parents who be you have to become a lawyer, doctor, or engineer.
Wow.
um, so I think there was a lot of plus points in that because that led to me and my brothers doing really well and being really passionate about what we do. But at the same time, um, you know we did have some other friends who were homeschooled as well, but it was like a handful, like maybe 10 families in our city who were doing that, and we would meet up for swim meets, play sports together. But it was not the same as being part of a big school where all the kids in the neighborhood go to this big public school. So already culturally, there was a disconnect for me. And so, because I was also homeschooled with an American curriculum, which focused a lot on training children to be independent in how they manage their homework and assignments, training them to express, articulate, debate, all things we don't really get that much exposure to in Asia. I was always already very much more opinionated than your average Malaysian kid, more a woman. And so it just was very natural going to university and then doing my master's later on to feel more comfortable around people who have had that similar upbringing where you're encouraged to express yourself, where you're encouraged to have a voice. And I've really valued being around different cultures because there were different environments I would be in where I would feel less like a third culture kid and like, okay, more like I belong here and I more like I blend in here. And they tended to be environments where individual thought is encouraged, where differences are celebrated, where people welcome new ideas instead of being afraid of them or trying to shut them down. And as a creative person, I'm all about the new ideas. So I think I felt that comfort in being in diverse environments. And at work, I also began to observe, and I do a lot of reading. I love reading stuff about how to, personal development stuff, but also stuff like how to optimize your teams, because I lead teams, how to optimize work environments. And there's just so much evidence for how diversity creates a culture of more innovation, more creativity. And so I also began to value that a lot at work. Usually the people that I find most difficult to work with at the beginning are the ones that I will, after some time of coming together, storming, norming, we will actually come up with better ideas because we have different perspectives and we bring different things to the table. So I also started to appreciate that at work. And yeah, I think now with the world being so global and being in the line of marketing where I can do all my work online, remotely, digitally, it's just become even easier to collaborate. Even in my full-time job and even in my freelance projects, I've always at least worked with people from at least 3 different time zones. And it's just been so much fun. A lot more organization required, managing your calendars and time zones. But I've just become so used to it that I don't think I can ever go back to a very homogenous environment because it sometimes feels a bit limiting, a bit suffocating.
That's great. And when you enjoy it, like that is something that, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, moving forward. This is kind of like a deep question, but again, because I am also exploring on to this topic. So I've been trying to figure out self-doubt in different stages of life, be it personal, professional, from internal or external context. What is your understanding of self-doubt or self-limiting beliefs, and how do you shut those demons down and move past them and be awesome instead?
Mm, that's a very powerful question. I think it's something I think even the best of us struggle with, even if it doesn't show on the outside. I think it's a very real thing we all have to figure out every day. I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome, or like, am I good enough? When I was younger and I was getting promoted, I was asking myself, am I old enough to do this? When I was in environments that were male dominated, I asked myself, I'm one of the few women here. Will I be taken seriously? But I realized that if you look at these things, there's no end. Of course, there are systemic structures in place, and of course, we should advocate for more equitable systemic structures to be built. But on an individual basis, if we want to look at the things that limit us, even the most fortunate person can find something to look at. And I think it's about reclaiming our power by owning our stories. So even the stories that were really difficult and painful, for me, I had grown up with friends who had families who were financially stable. And in my family, finances had always been challenging throughout my childhood. There were times I would not know, would I get enough tuition money to pay for my next batch of school books? And as someone really motivated to be her best, not knowing whether I could finish school on time was something that stressed me out as a kid. And I think just owning my story meant taking that narrative of, hey, I come from a place where money is a struggle, but it doesn't have to be, and I don't have to carry that identity with me. But what it has done for me is it's made me really hardworking and really appreciative of the value of money. Since I was a kid, I've become good at managing a simple budget, and then going on later to work, managing department budgets. And that has taught me how to be responsible, how to be detail oriented. And even though I don't like that I had to go through that, it has made me who I am. It has contributed to the success that I have today. And I think owning that story means accepting that I might not have been able to focus on other things. Like I always wanted to go for piano classes. My parents couldn't afford it. I might not have been able to focus on other things like piano or whatever it is other kids focused on. And maybe that was what they went on to pursue in their lives and in their careers. But that's their story. And they might have had different challenges that I don't know about. So owning my stories, I think owning my strengths and the struggles, recognizing how that's contributed to the abilities that I do have now, and focusing on that. I think I always remind myself when I feel insecure. I have a tendency to compare. I think we all do, and I think social media makes it 10 times worse to look at someone else. Well, this person is my age. This person comes from the same environment. Why are they doing so much better than me? But you don't know what's going on with their mental health. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors with their relationships. You don't know what's going on, with their family and so on, or even with their health, right? Someone might be looking all great on the outside, but really struggling with a personal issue behind closed doors. So I always remind myself to this words, stay in your lane, and don't, almost like stay in your lane, be like a racehorse with the blinders on, and just focus on where you need to go and your end goal, your target, your direction, because someone else next to you is running a totally different race, and it's just really not fair and not logical to compare in that way.
Right, and that is so powerful. Like the thing that I like the most in what you talked about is like if you look for the reasons to have self-doubt, you'll have like countless of them. Like they will not because that's so much out there, right? So as you said, like, if you're focused on where you are going, that's gonna make a lot of difference. So that's really powerful.
And also, just one more thing I thought about was something that one of my previous bosses, his name is Sean Ferguson, and even if he always reminded me, even if you don't hit the target 100%, there's that saying, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll end up among the stars. And he would say it in a slightly different way, where we would come to him with some progress update, and we'll say, how does this look? Well, we couldn't achieve this XYZ, but we're like 80% of the way there. And he would take a look at it and he would say, the most important, and I would start with apologizing, I'm sorry we didn't meet the deadline. And he would say, it's in the right direction. As long as you're in the right direction and you made progress and you're further ahead than yesterday, that's good. Because what would be worse is doing all this work and being in a totally wrong direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think remembering that as well in our speed obsessed world, that sometimes most of the time direction is more important than the speed you're going at.
That's true, absolutely. Great. And moving towards the last questions, and I kind of changed this question to most of the time people ask about what do you want to say to your old 20-year old self. So I changed it to make it more interesting to what is one thing you would want to tell your future self, maybe 10-20 years down the line.
That is a really interesting question. I've never thought about that. Well, if I look back at the difference between my 20-year-old self and 30-year-old self, and what I would want to tell my 40-something-year-old self is, I think I can't wait to see where you end up, because I think I forget what people say life ends after 30 or 40. I think my life each decade has gotten better than the last, with a lot of self-awareness and work. So I can't wait to see where you end up in your 40s.
That's amazing. Thank you for giving such a nice answer to that. Amazing. So with that, I think I really enjoyed our conversation, and as I said, your work always inspire me, and you're also one of my go-to source when I need some inspiration and whatever I'm going through. So first, thank you for taking out the time today for this video interview, but also thank you for doing all the amazing things you do, because as you said, if it can change just one person's perspective or may inspire them in their own lives, I mean, that's a job done well, I think.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me as well. I think every time I talk to you or even just read your posts, you always are not afraid to go deep, and I think we all need more spaces in today's consumer world of convenience and fast, quick fixes, shortcuts. I think we really need a lot more spaces to go deep, and I always appreciate that with you. You give me that opportunity to reflect, think deeply, and hopefully people who watch this and listen to this will also be prompted to reflect on their own lives in a deeper way as well.
Definitely. All right, so thank you so much, Crystal, for taking out the time to do this today. And for everyone who is watching us, I'm gonna put Crystal's Instagram account details in the description so that you can reach out and see what she does and be inspired. So again, thank you so much. And with that, we'll conclude the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.